Good evening, everybody. This is for the course this will be utilized in is a course titled the European Witch-Craze. And this is the foundations, the focus of this is the foundations of the European Witch-Craze. The European Witch-Craze is a European-wide event that occurred all throughout Europe. Every major country in Europe was partook in this thing. Germany, France, Denmark, England, Scotland, even Russia had parts of this witch craze. So it occurred all throughout there, and each part of Europe has its own tenets of it, being the group focused on such as women were the targets in Germany and England and Scotland. Old women were the targets in Germany. The England and Scotland saw young women. France saw a lot of men, a lot of clergy. This takes on a different face wherever it occurs, but historians generally agree this could be considered a European-wide event that occurred between 1450 and 1750. The wider historiography on this topic, people really try to figure out what caused this thing to occur. It's highly controversial. It's been highly debated. A woman named Margaret Murray, back in the mid 1900s, she believed that these women were part of a greater cult, a fertility cult is what she called it. This sparks a debate that continues on to this day, and the biggest thing about the historiography of the European witch craze, or the European witch hunts, is what caused it, what allowed it to continue. What were the major aspects of it? So the wider questions too could be, why were women targeted more than men? Why were some countries more involved than others? This lecture is the foundations of the European witch craze, which is often it's been heavily debated back and forth. What are the central foundations of the European witch craze? Why did it occur? And prior to this occurrence, prior to these trials, you have so that between the 1450 and 1750 is when this occurs, and it's tens of thousands of people are involved, if not hundreds of thousands get tried. Tens of thousands are executed for being witches. They could be exiled, they could be locked away in prisons. There's a lot of this going on at this time, and prior to this, there's a common belief in the use of magic, with the use of magic or supernatural means to an end in these European villages and smaller towns, and even some of the bigger cities had this stuff involved, where you knew people in your area that could help you conduct, I guess magic is one word of using it. Magic, just supernatural means to do anything, and a lot of these people used it. They used healers. They used divination was a big one at the time. Divination is basically the use of a third-party object of some sort to kind of experience things outside of yourself, outside of your own experience. If you want to see the future, see what somebody's doing, you could use divination. A lot of times there were people in your European society that would help you do so. And these beliefs about witchcraft began to shift during the early modern period, as there was a lot of turmoil in Europe. Things go south. There's war, famine, there's an ice age that occurs at this time. It's a major era of population decline. There's an era of of religious breakup between the Catholic. We have the Protestant Reformation, the breakup in the Catholic Church. People within the church start to wonder, why are these things happening, and they start to believe that there's a direct spiritual warfare going on the earth, and it's the involvement of the devil himself. people didn't really believe per se that the devil was directly involving himself in the bad things happening, but he was using people to do that. And these ideas went up from the top, being your religious leadership, your political leadership, and trickled down to the people below that you know, it was human beings that were being directly responsible for this. So this is you know, this stuff that occurs, these issues that occur, shift the idea from there being beneficial magic only, or beneficial use of, you know, supernatural powers, to the use of dark magic, maleficia. This is a stuff that is used to harm people only, harm people through like means of, my crops got damaged, my child got sick, my cows died, you know, my anything really that you could attribute to something, somebody put a curse on you, somebody had a problem with you and made this happen. And the reason why people believe this is allowed to occur is because they start to believe the devil himself is working within their society, and he's giving people the means to do these things, to harm other people. This is what starts to be believed about witchcraft. Witches can conduct harmful magic on people, and these are people you often know, people that live in your village, live in your town, you know, people you might have even gone to seek help for a problem prior. In Germany, per se, old women were targets, because a lot of times old women watched your kids for you. They were, you know, if they would, you know, watch a lot of kids, and if a kid got sick and died, it was easy to turn around and say, well, she must have done it because she's an old person who can't have kids anymore. She's jealous of me, you know. She doesn't have a man in town, what have you. They would come up with these ideas. This is just, a lot of historians have done a lot of research on this. So the foundations of what made the witch craze occur, you know, what took this idea that dark magic, you know, this heresy that was dark magic was bad enough to cause a European-wide witch craze is a controversial subject among historians. Historians a lot of times don't really know where to go with this subject, because it's so hard to get accurate records. It didn't affect just one religious group, one country, one, you know, social group, one area. It affected so many different people in so many different ways. You got to sit back and look at, where did it come from? And this is where we trace out what are the foundations of the witch craze. So when I say witch, what do I mean? A witch at the time, yes, we said performs harmful magic, but a witch also performs has a direct pact with the devil. This is if you read any of the primary source material on witchcraft at this time, the way the witch gets her powers or his powers is a direct relationship with the devil. A pact. The pact with the devil, he or she, a lot of times it was a woman having a sexual relationship with the devil, having some type of written pact with the devil. These things were believed because heresy at this time is such a crime, and heresy comes from a breakaway from the Christian values of Europe, and you're using what's the opposite of that, the devil. There's a book by Stuart Clark written called behind me here, Thinking with Demons. Witchcraft, witches represented the complete polar opposite of what was deemed good in European society, and that meant God, the devil. The devil's the opposite, right? So the devil is this pact with the devil is one of the most important parts of it. The other part is the Sabbat, is what they call it, where witches meet in groups. Now, the foundations of why this occurred, this is part of the controversy, but it begins with the religious elites in society were able to use a new method of trial of heretics called the Inquisition, methods of torture. And they could torture people to get the guilty sentence they wanted. They would sit there and they would ask people leading questions, and they would crank up the torture, and they'd say, all right, you did this, didn't you? And you'd say no, and they'd make it harder. You did this, didn't you? And then eventually you just say yes. And they would use that to get what they wanted. They would do that until they heard what they wanted to hear. This is the legal foundations is the most important part. The Inquisition is what made this thing able to occur. It's what made this so that people would see, the inquisitors would do the torture until they got the answers they wanted to hear, and the people in society would see the commonalities amongst these people, because of course they're all common, because they're waiting to hear what they want to hear, and they're saying this is what makes a witch, and this would spread onward and outward. So that's the legal foundations. Number one most important part. 2, intellectual foundations. Intellectual foundations means your educated leadership has the ability to spread this idea that witches are directly linked with heresy. And the biggest focus of this, like the biggest source, is a book called the Malleus Maleficarum, written by a highly ambitious Dominican priest named Heinrich Instatoris. Instatoris wrote it with an older clergyman named Jacob Springer. And this is the book this is another one of those controversial subjects. How influential was this book? It is now widely agreed that the Malleus Maleficarum, which is a book I would discuss in a later lecture, but the book that where you get the pact with the devil, the Sabbat being important, this is in harmful magic, comes from the Malleus Maleficarum. And Instatoris hears these weird happenings going on in Innsbruck, Austria, in the 1500s, and he goes in and he investigates via Inquisition, the Inquisition, old torture, and when doing so, he starts to hear one person's perspective, and so he hears that, and he waits until he gets the second person's perspective. This is a man who had incredible influence on the witch-craze, but only really partook in 2 trials. He's Mr. Ambitious, though. He is pushing for the top. And the witch becomes the ultimate heretic. And in his book, this is where you get the Sabbat, the harmful magic. Once again, the pact with the devil comes from him. And almost every trial from here on out will have some semblance of these things. Always it's the pact with the devil is important. Now this is so important because a intellectual foundation is what allows the common person to believe this is real. If your educated people are doing that, your educated people are trying you, the educated people are making you guilty, they're spreading this idea to other educated people, and it's trickling down to you, and you're believing like my life's falling apart because of the heresy and the evil going on in the world. It's easy to connect what these elites are doing to what your problems are and say that the solution is this, these trials. We got to get these people out of society. So that's your most important aspects. That's the foundations of the witch craze, is the legal foundations, the Inquisition, the torture methods allowed, the ability to accuse people without having to prove your accusations. Instead, back then you could just use the Inquisition. Torturers would, the trials would essentially just get out of you whatever they wanted. So it's that, and the intellectual foundations coming from these witch hunting books that pass this idea on to other people. Would eventually write their own witch hunting books, or people that would your rich political leaders in your town that could read, and they would read this and they would understand that a lot of the issues that are being widespread in Europe are spreading, and you need to get a handle on this. This is what we look for. And then your neighbors are thinking things are going on, so they start pointing fingers at you. So the most important aspects of the witch craze are This is the foundation of it. It's the intellectual foundations and the legal foundations. Thank you.